The shadow of loss. The last box of Julianne's clothes sat by the door, packed but unmoved for 3 weeks. Oliver Reed glanced at it as he hurried past, straightening his tie with one hand and clutching his daughter's lunchbox in the other. The morning light caught the dust particles floating around it, making them shimmer like tiny ghosts. "Penelope! We're running late again, sweetheart," he called up the stairs, trying to keep his voice gentle despite the pressure building behind his temples. The architecture firm wouldn't wait, and his latest project, a community center in the heart of downtown, was already behind schedule. When his 7-year-old daughter finally appeared at the top of the stairs, her brown curls uncombed and her shoelaces untied, Oliver felt the familiar pang of inadequacy. Before Julianne's illness took her 14 months ago, mornings had been filled with pancakes shaped like animals and carefully braided hair. Now, they were a chaotic scramble of forgotten permission slips and mismatched socks. "I can't find Mr. Whiskers," Penelope said, her voice small and flat. The stuffed cat had been a gift from Julianne on Penelope's 5th birthday, and it hadn't left her side since her mother's passing. Oliver closed his eyes briefly. "We'll look for him tonight, I promise. But Ms. Thompson is expecting you at school in 20 minutes, and I have a client meeting at 9. The drive to school was silent, save for the gentle patter of rain against the windshield. In the rearview mirror, Oliver watched Penelope stare out the window, her reflection blending with the gray cityscape beyond. She hadn't smiled, really smiled, in months. "Remember Mrs. Fenton will pick you up today?" Oliver said as he pulled up to the school. "I have that late meeting, but I'll be home for bedtime." Penelope nodded without looking at him, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. That evening, after tucking Penelope into bed with the newly found Mr. Whiskers, Oliver sat at the kitchen table surrounded by resumes. Mrs. Fenton, their elderly neighbor who had been helping with after-school care, had informed him that her arthritis was worsening. He needed someone more permanent, someone who could give Penelope the attention he was failing to provide. "You're doing your best, Ollie," his sister Rebecca had said during their weekly phone call. "But you need help. A child needs more than rushed mornings and exhausted evenings." The third resume in the stack caught his attention. Margot Winter, 34, former elementary school teacher with a degree in child psychology. Her reference letter mentioned her work with children experiencing grief. Oliver stared at her photograph, warm eyes, a kind smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced, and felt a flicker of hope. The interview was set for Saturday morning. Margot arrived precisely on time, dressed simply in jeans and a blue cardigan. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she carried a worn leather messenger bag. "Thank you for meeting with me," Oliver said, gesturing toward the living room sofa. "Penelope is at her piano lesson until noon." "Perfect timing, then," Margot replied, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. "I'd love to hear about her, who she is, not just what she needs." There was something disarming about Margot's directness. Before Oliver realized it, he was telling her about Penelope's fascination with astronomy, her collection of rocks that she insisted had magical properties, and her recent withdrawal from the world. "And what about you, Mr. Reed?" Margot asked, catching him off guard. "How are you managing?" The question, so simple yet so rarely asked, momentarily stripped away his practiced composure. "I'm surviving," he admitted. "Some days better than others." Margot nodded, not with pity, but with understanding. "Children are remarkably intuitive. They mirror what they see." She leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps what Penelope needs most is to see that it's okay to move forward without leaving love behind." When Penelope returned, she hovered in the doorway, assessing the stranger in their living room with cautious eyes. "Hello?" "Penelope," Margot said, not moving from her seat. "Your father tells me you know the names of all the constellations." Penelope's gaze flickered to her father, then back to Margot. "Not all of them," she corrected quietly. "Just the important ones. Would you show me sometime? I've always found the night sky a bit overwhelming." The smallest hint of interest sparked in Penelope's eyes. "It's not overwhelming once you know the stories." By Monday afternoon, Margot Winter had become their new nanny, and Oliver had ordered the discreet security cameras that would change everything. pixels of suspicion. The cameras arrived in a plain brown box, 4 wireless devices no larger than a deck of cards. Oliver installed them on a Sunday while Penelope was at a play date, one in the living room angled toward the main play area, one in the kitchen overlooking the breakfast nook, one in the hallway with a view of the front door and stairs, and one in Penelope's bedroom, positioned high on the bookshelf among her collection of astronomy books and stuffed planets. "It's just a precaution," he justified to himself as he synced the cameras to the secure app on his phone. Any responsible parent would do the same. But as he tested the system, watching a pixelated version of himself move through the empty rooms, Oliver felt a twinge of guilt. Margot had been with them for 2 weeks now, and Penelope was already showing signs of improvement. She had begun talking at dinner again, sharing small details about her day, the cloud that looked like a dragon, the new library book about deep sea creatures, the fact that she had played with someone during recess. Margot had transformed their chaotic routines into rhythmic rituals. Breakfast was now served with a side of riddles or would-you-rather questions that often made Penelope giggle. After-school hours included outdoor exploration, regardless of weather, followed by a creative activity that usually left Margot with paint on her sleeves or clay under her fingernails. Oliver found himself lingering in the doorway on evenings when he made it home before bedtime, watching as Margot and Penelope sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by art supplies or star charts or collections of leaves they had gathered. In those moments, the house felt alive again, no longer a museum of grief. So why the cameras? The question haunted him as he tucked them discreetly into their designated spots. Perhaps it was the conversation he'd overheard at the office. A colleague, sharing a horror story about a babysitter caught shaking a toddler. Or maybe it was deeper, the gnawing fear that he was missing something important in Penelope's life, some vital clue to her healing that he couldn't see in his brief windows of presence. On Wednesday afternoon, during a break between meetings, Oliver opened the surveillance app. The kitchen feed showed Margot at the counter, rolling out dough while Penelope stood on a step stool beside her, concentrating intensely as she cut shapes with cookie cutters. "My mom used to make star cookies for my birthday," Penelope said, her voice slightly tinny through the camera's microphone. Oliver's finger hovered over the volume button, his heart suddenly racing. Penelope rarely mentioned Julianne unprompted. "Did she?" Margot replied, not missing a beat. "What made them special?" "She put lemon in them, and she let me put the sprinkles on, even when I made a mess." Margot nodded thoughtfully. "I don't have lemon, but we could add some orange zest. Would that be okay? Not to replace the lemon ones, those are special mom cookies. These would be different." Penelope considered this, her small face serious. "Orange is Dad's favorite." "Then orange it is. He works so hard. I bet he'd love to come home to cookies you made." Oliver watched as Penelope carefully cut another star, her tongue poking out between her teeth in concentration, a mannerism so like Julianne's that his chest tightened. When she smiled up at Margot, it was genuine, reaching her eyes for the first time in months. That evening, he found a plate of slightly misshapen orange-scented star cookies on the counter with a note in Penelope's wobbly handwriting. "For Dad. They're not Mom's, but they're still good." The cameras became a window into a world Oliver hadn't fully seen, Margot patiently helping Penelope work through a tantrum about homework, not with stern words, but with deep breaths and gentle redirection. Margot teaching Penelope to fold origami stars to hang in her window. "So you can see the constellations, even when it's cloudy." Margot sitting on the edge of Penelope's bed during a thunderstorm, not dismissing her fears, but acknowledging them, while pointing out the mathematical patterns in the seconds between lightning and thunder. But it was the moment on Friday night that truly shook him. Oliver had been delayed at work, missing bedtime yet again. At midnight, he checked the app one last time before sleep and saw movement in Penelope's room. His daughter was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. Before he could grab his keys to rush home, Margot appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard Penelope's distress. "I had the dream again," Penelope sobbed. "The one where I forget what Mom looked like." Margot sat on the edge of the bed, not touching Penelope but present. "That's a scary dream. What if I really do forget her?" Margot was quiet for a moment. "Close your eyes," she finally said. "Now think about how it felt when she hugged you, not what she looked like, how it felt." Oliver watched as his daughter's face changed, her breath steadying. "Our hearts remember even when our minds get fuzzy," Margot said softly. "And you know what? Your mom is still here. In your smile, in the way you notice beautiful things, in how deeply you love your dad." "He misses her too," Penelope whispered. "Sometimes he looks so sad." "That's because love doesn't just disappear when someone goes away. But I think you and your dad are helping each other remember the good parts, aren't you?" As Penelope nodded and settled back under her covers, Oliver closed the app, his vision blurred with tears. The camera had captured what he feared most, not danger or neglect, but the raw truth that his daughter was carrying grief far too heavy for her small shoulders, and that a stranger was seeing and addressing what he had been too consumed to fully acknowledge. Reflections in digital light, the autumn air turned crisp as September faded into October. Oliver found himself checking the surveillance feeds less frequently, no longer driven by suspicion, but by a different hunger, the desire to understand the version of his daughter that emerged when he wasn't present. Margot had become a constant in their lives, arriving each morning with quiet energy and leaving each evening having transformed their home in subtle ways. A new drawing taped to the refrigerator, fresh flowers in the vase that had stood empty since Julianne's funeral, the lingering scent of homemade bread or simmering soup. What struck Oliver most as he watched the recordings was Margot's fundamental respect for Penelope. She never spoke down to her or dismissed her opinions. When Penelope insisted on wearing mismatched rain boots because the right one is for jumping in deep puddles and the left one is for climbing wet rocks, Margot simply nodded and asked which adventure they should pursue first. When Penelope declared that thunder was actually the sound of giant space cats purring, Margot suggested they draw what these cosmic felines might look like. One Tuesday afternoon, Oliver opened the app during a meeting break to find Penelope and Margot sitting at the dining room table surrounded by photographs. With a jolt, he recognized them, the albums he had packed away in the attic, unable to bear the smiling faces captured in happier times. "This was Mom's favorite beach," Penelope was saying, pointing to a sun-drenched image of Julianne building a sandcastle. She liked to collect the shells that had holes in them. She said they had already completed their journey. "She sounds very wise," Margot replied, carefully handling each photo that Penelope showed her. "Dad doesn't like to look at the pictures. They make him sad." Margot was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes things can be sad and good at the same time, like how these pictures might make you feel sad because you miss her. But they're also good because they help you remember happy times." Penelope considered this, tracing her finger along the edge of a photo. "Could we make something for Dad? So he can remember the happy but not get too sad?" The camera caught Margot's soft smile. "What a thoughtful idea. What were you thinking?" "Maybe a special book with just a few pictures? And I could write the happy memories so he knows which part to think about." Oliver closed the app, his meeting forgotten. That night, he found himself standing before the box of Julianne's clothes that still waited by the door. With steady hands, he finally carried it to his car, ready to donate the items to the women's shelter Julianne had volunteered at. As autumn progressed, Oliver began arriving home earlier when possible, sometimes in time to join Margot and Penelope for their afternoon activities. He found himself drawn to Margot's calm presence, her thoughtful responses to his daughter's endless questions, and the way she seemed to anticipate needs before they were expressed. It was during a parent-teacher conference that Oliver encountered a piece of Margot's past. Ms. Winters, Penelope's art teacher stopped him as he was leaving. "Mr. Reed, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it's been having your sister-in-law volunteer for our fall art program. The children adore her." Oliver blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, my sister-in-law? Ms. Winter, Margot?" She mentioned she was family when she signed up. The way she spoke about Penelope, I just assumed. That evening, after Penelope was asleep, Oliver confronted Margot as she was gathering her things to leave. "You've been volunteering at Penelope's school?" Margot paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes. They needed help with the art program, and it seemed like a good way to better understand Penelope's school environment. I should have mentioned it. The art teacher thinks you're my sister-in-law." A flush crept up Margot's neck. "I may have implied a family connection. The school has strict policies about who can volunteer in classrooms. I just wanted to make sure Penelope was adjusting well socially." She met his gaze directly. "I apologize for the deception. It won't happen again." Oliver studied her face, searching for signs of ulterior motives but finding only genuine concern. "Why do you care so much? About Penelope, about our family. You go well beyond what the job requires." Margot was quiet for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone who shapes your world," she finally said. "My husband died 3 years ago. Rock climbing accident. One minute we were planning our future and the next." She shook her head. "Children shouldn't have to navigate grief alone. Neither should their parents." The revelation shifted something fundamental in Oliver's understanding of Margot. That night, long after she had gone, he sat in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey, watching the surveillance feed from earlier that day. Margot and Penelope were dancing in the living room to one of Julianne's favorite songs, their shadows stretching across the hardwood floors, both laughing as they twirled and dipped. Oliver hadn't heard his daughter laugh like that in over a year, and he realized with a start that he hadn't laughed either, not until Margot had entered their lives. The memory book appeared on his nightstand, the following weekend, a simple album with a dozen carefully selected photographs and Penelope's wobbly handwriting beneath each one. Mom and Dad's wedding. They had chocolate cake and Mom got some on her nose. Beach vacation when I was 4. Mom found a sand dollar and said it was magic money from the ocean. The final page held a recent photograph of Penelope and Oliver that he didn't recognize. They were in the backyard, heads tilted back to look at the stars, their profiles illuminated by soft porch light. Beneath it, Penelope had written, "Me and Dad looking at Mom's stars. She can see us too." Oliver closed the book, overwhelmed by the weight of what he had almost lost in his grief, the ability to create new memories while honoring those that came before. And as he drifted to sleep, he realized something else. He had stopped checking the cameras altogether. The fractured frame November arrived with biting winds and early sunsets. As Thanksgiving approached, a tentative new normal had settled over the Reed household. Oliver had adjusted his work schedule to be home for dinner 3 nights a week. Penelope had joined the school's junior astronomy club, and Margot had become something more than an employee, but less defined than a friend, a steady presence that both father and daughter had come to rely on. The cameras remained active but forgotten, gathering digital dust as they silently recorded the daily rhythms of the healing household, until the power outage. A severe windstorm had knocked out electricity across the neighborhood. Oliver arrived home to find Margot and Penelope in the kitchen surrounded by candles, roasting marshmallows over the gas stove and telling ghost stories. "Dad!" Penelope exclaimed. "Margot says this is called urban camping. We made shadow puppets and everything." The evening unfolded with a simple charm. Board games by candlelight, flashlight tag throughout the darkened house, and finally, all 3 huddled under blankets in the living room as Margot taught them constellations using glow-in-the-dark stickers on the ceiling. When Penelope finally drifted to sleep, her head resting against Oliver's shoulder, he found himself watching Margot in the soft candlelight. "Thank you," he said quietly, for turning a potential disaster into an adventure. Margot smiled, the flickering light catching the auburn highlights in her hair. "That's the trick, isn't it? Reframing the narrative. Is that what you did? After your husband?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Eventually." Not at first. At first, I was angry at the universe for taking someone so vital, so necessary to my happiness. She adjusted the blanket around Penelope's shoulders. But then I realized that by focusing only on what was lost, I was losing him a second time, losing all the joy and perspective he had brought to my life. Oliver found himself leaning slightly toward her. How did you move forward? By acknowledging that grief isn't something you overcome, it's something you incorporate. It becomes part of your landscape. She glanced at Penelope's peaceful face. And sometimes, helping someone else navigate their own landscape helps you make sense of yours. The power returned with a hum around midnight. Oliver carried Penelope to her bed while Margot gathered the candles and blankets. As the house settled back into electric normality, Oliver's phone lit up with notifications, the security system reconnecting to the network. The familiar app icon triggered a wave of guilt. Here was Margot, sharing her own painful past, while he continued to secretly monitor her interactions with his daughter. "Everything okay?" Margot asked, noticing his frown as she prepared to leave. "Yes, just work emails catching up after the outage," he lied, pocketing the phone. "Drive safely. The roads might still have debris." After she left, Oliver opened the app, intending to disable the system entirely. But curiosity pulled him to check the most recent footage from before the power failure. He scrolled back to that afternoon, watching as Penelope arrived home from school, as Margot helped her with homework, as they prepared a simple dinner in anticipation of the storm. And then he saw it, Margot standing in Penelope's bedroom, staring directly at the camera hidden among the astronomy books. Her expression shifted from confusion to realization to hurt as she reached toward the shelf. The footage ended abruptly as the power failed. Oliver sat heavily on the couch, stomach churning. She knew. She had discovered the surveillance and said nothing, continuing through the evening as if everything were normal, reading stories and playing games and sharing her most personal pain. The next morning brought tense normalcy. Margot arrived at her usual time, greeting Penelope with her customary warmth. But when Oliver tried to catch her eye, she politely looked away, focusing entirely on getting Penelope ready for school. "Margot," he began, as Penelope ran upstairs to find her backpack. "About yesterday. We should discuss this later," she interrupted quietly. Not with Penelope in the house. The day crawled by, each minute stretching as Oliver rehearsed explanations and apologies in his mind. When he arrived home that evening, Penelope was already in pajamas, her hair still damp from her bath. "Margot said she had to leave early today," his daughter informed him, a note of confusion in her voice. She seemed sad. "Did something happen?" "I hope not, sweetheart," Oliver replied, his chest tight. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, just like kids do. After tucking Penelope in, he found a note on the kitchen counter in Margot's neat handwriting. "We need to talk about the cameras. I'll come by after Penelope's bedtime tomorrow." The following evening, stretched endlessly as Oliver waited for Margot's arrival. When the doorbell finally rang at 8:30, he found her on the porch, her expression carefully neutral. "How long have you been recording me?" she asked without preamble as she stepped inside. "Since the beginning," he admitted, leading her to the living room. "It was never about not trusting you specifically. After Julianne died, I became hypervigilant about Penelope's safety." Margot remained standing, arms crossed. "I understand the instinct to protect your child. What I don't understand is why you continued the surveillance after weeks of evidence that she was safe with me. What were you looking for, Oliver?" The question struck at the heart of his discomfort. At first, reassurance. But then, he struggled to articulate the complex truth. "Then I think I was looking for guidance. Watching you with Penelope showed me what I was missing, how to connect with her in ways I'd forgotten." "You could have asked. We could have talked about parenting strategies, about grief, about anything you wanted to know." Her voice cracked slightly. "Instead, you violated my privacy and made me unknowingly perform for an audience." "I'm sorry," Oliver said, meaning it more deeply than he had anticipated. "I should have disabled them weeks ago. I knew it was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was for Penelope's benefit." "Was it? Or was it because you're afraid to trust again?" Margot's gaze was penetrating. Because if you trust someone, you might lose them, like you lost Julianne, and that would break you all over again. The accuracy of her assessment left him speechless. I care about Penelope, Margot continued, and despite my better judgment, I care about you too. But I can't work in a home where I'm not trusted. She placed her house key on the coffee table. I'll stay through the end of the week to help Penelope adjust to my leaving. She deserves a proper goodbye. As she turned to leave, Oliver found his voice. What if I remove them? All of them right now while you watch? Margot paused at the door. It's not about the cameras, Oliver. It's about what they represent. After she left, Oliver climbed the stepladder in Penelope's dark bedroom and retrieved the small device from the bookshelf. One by one, he collected each camera, placing them in a box that he sealed and placed in the garage. But the damage was done. The trust was broken. The following days brought a heavy silence to the house. Margot maintained her warmth with Penelope, but with Oliver she was politely distant. Penelope, intuitive as always, sensed the change. Are you and Margot fighting? She asked on Thursday night as Oliver tucked her in. Not fighting, he said carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt other people's feelings even when they don't mean to. Penelope considered this. Like when I broke Emma's clay unicorn and tried to hide it instead of saying sorry. Something like that, yes. Emma forgave me when I made her a new one. Penelope yawned. Maybe you could make Margot something. Out of the mouths of babes, Oliver thought as he kissed her forehead. The solution wasn't so simple, but the principle was sound. Genuine amends required more than words. That night, he sat at his drafting table for the first time in months, drawing until dawn. Beyond the Lens Friday arrived with the finality of an approaching storm. It would be Margot's last day, and the weight of this knowledge hung over the household like a physical presence. Oliver had left for work before dawn, leaving Margot to handle the morning routine alone as she had done countless times before. But today, each familiar action, pouring Penelope's cereal, checking her backpack, braiding her increasingly long hair, was tinged with the bitter sweetness of endings. Why can't you stay? Penelope asked as they walked to the bus stop, her small hand clutching Margot's with unusual tightness. Did I do something wrong? The question pierced Margot's carefully maintained composure. She knelt on the sidewalk, bringing herself to eye level with the child who had somehow, despite her professional boundaries, claimed a piece of her heart. No, sweetheart, you've done everything right. Sometimes adults need to make hard choices that have nothing to do with the children they love. But who will make Orange Star cookies with me? Who will know which bedtime stories don't give me nightmares? Who will help Dad remember to smile? Margot swallowed against the tightness in her throat. Your dad is learning those things. He's becoming braver every day, just like you. She tucked a stray curl behind Penelope's ear. And I won't disappear completely. I'll come to your astronomy club presentation next month, and maybe we can have occasional park days. But they both knew it wouldn't be the same. When the school bus pulled away, Margot stood on the corner longer than necessary, watching until it disappeared around the bend. The walk back to the Reed house felt longer than usual. Each step weighted with the knowledge that it was one of the last she would take along this particular path. Inside, she began the familiar ritual of straightening up, erasing the morning's chaos as she had done each day. But as she moved through the rooms, memories rose to meet her. Penelope spinning in the living room, practicing for her dance recital. The pillow fort they had built during the rainstorm that stretched across the entire family room. The afternoon they had painted pottery at the kitchen table, ending up with more paint on their hands than on the ceramics. In Penelope's room, Margot paused before the wall they had transformed together. What had once been a blank space was now covered with a carefully crafted solar system, planets made from painted paper plates, stars cut from glow-in-the-dark paper, and comets fashioned from silver pipe cleaners and cotton balls. In the center, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it, was a small blue heart. That's where Mom is, Penelope had explained. In the middle of everything, Margot carefully placed the farewell gift she had made for Penelope on the bed, a handmade book titled The Girl Who Befriended the Stars, featuring a protagonist who bore a striking resemblance to Penelope. Beside it, she left a sealed envelope for Oliver containing her final thoughts on Penelope's progress and suggestions for maintaining their new routines. The rest of the day passed in a blur of ordinary tasks made extraordinary by their finality. By the time the front door opened at 3 o'clock, Margot had composed herself, ready for the difficult goodbye ahead. But instead of Penelope's quick footsteps, she heard Oliver's voice calling her name. She found him in the living room looking disheveled and anxious. "Where's Penelope?" he asked immediately. "The school nurse called about an hour ago," Margot explained, confusion giving way to concern at his expression. "Penelope fell during recess and hurt her wrist. I was just about to leave to pick her up." "It's broken," Oliver interrupted, running a hand through his hair. "The nurse called me after she couldn't reach you. Penelope's at Children's Hospital. I came home to get her comfort items before heading there." He glanced around frantically. Mr. Whiskers, her star nightlight, the blue blanket. Margot was already moving, gathering the items with practiced efficiency. "The blue blanket is in the dryer. I washed it this morning. Mr. Whiskers is on her desk chair. The nightlight is plugged in by her bed." Within minutes, they had collected everything and were heading to Oliver's car. The ride to the hospital was tense with shared worry, their personal conflict temporarily overshadowed by concern for Penelope. "She was trying to climb the highest part of the jungle gym," Oliver explained as they navigated through traffic. "The nurse said she kept saying she needed to get closer to the sky." Margot's heart clenched. For the astronomy presentation, she wanted to know how stars look from different heights. They found Penelope in the pediatric orthopedic ward, her left arm already encased in a cast, her face tear-streaked but calm. When she saw them both enter together, her expression brightened momentarily before clouding with confusion. "I thought you were leaving," she said to Margot. "Not today," Margot replied, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Not when my favorite astronaut has had a crash landing." The next few hours blurred together. Doctor consultations, care instructions, paperwork. Through it all, Oliver and Margot functioned as a seamless unit, each anticipating the other's questions and concerns. By the time they were cleared to take Penelope home, evening had fallen. In the car, Penelope dozed in the back seat, sedated by pain medication and emotional exhaustion. Oliver glanced at Margot in the passenger seat. "Thank you for staying," he said quietly. "I know today was supposed to be your last day." Margot kept her eyes on the road ahead. "I wouldn't have left in the middle of this." "I know," Oliver acknowledged. "That's who you are. That's why—" he hesitated. "That's why I hope you'll reconsider." When they arrived home, Oliver carried Penelope to her bedroom. Margot followed with the comfort items, helping to settle the drowsy child into bed. As they stood watching Penelope drift toward sleep, the star nightlight casting gentle patterns across the ceiling, Oliver touched Margot's elbow lightly. "There's something I need to show you," he whispered, leading her out to the hallway. In the family room, spread across his drafting table, was a detailed architectural rendering, a small cottage nestled among trees, with large windows and a wraparound porch. "What is this?" Margot asked, studying the meticulous drawing. "It's the guest house," Oliver explained. "Or it could be. There's enough room on the property behind the garden." He traced the outline of the structure with his finger. "Private entrance, separate utilities, completely independent living space. But close enough. Close enough for what? For you to have your own home while still being part of our lives. If you wanted," he met her gaze directly, "I removed all the cameras. I'll never install them again. But this isn't just about making amends. It's about acknowledging what we've become to each other. What you've become to us." Margot studied the drawings, her expression unreadable. "This is a grand gesture, Oliver. But trust isn't rebuilt with blueprints." "I know," he admitted. "This is just the beginning. A promise that I'm committed to change, to openness, to creating a future where we all have space to heal and grow." He gestured to the plans. "But only if that's what you want, too." Margot was quiet for a long moment. "I'd need my own workspace." "For painting," Oliver pointed to a section of the drawing. "North-facing windows. Best natural light." A small smile tugged at her lips despite her resolve. "And I'd need clear boundaries. Professional and personal. We'll define them together. Write them down if necessary. And Penelope, what does she think about all this? Oliver's expression softened. She's the one who suggested it, though not in so many words. She asked why you couldn't live in our backyard like in her fairy tales, close enough for cookies but far enough for privacy. A quiet laugh escaped Margot. She does have a way with words. From down the hall, Penelope's voice called out sleepily, "Margot? Dad, where did you go?" They found her sitting up in bed, blinking drowsily in the dim light. "I had a dream that Margot was leaving again," she said, her voice small. Margot sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm still here." "For how long?" Margot glanced up at Oliver, who stood in the doorway, watching them both with unguarded affection. "Let's say, long enough to see if your dad can actually build that cottage he's designing," Margot replied carefully. "And maybe long enough to help you learn all the constellations, even the unimportant ones." Penelope's smile illuminated her tired face. "That's going to take forever." "Well," Margot said, smoothing the blanket over Penelope's cast, "we don't have to decide forever just yet. We can start with tomorrow and see where it leads." Later that night, after Penelope had fallen back asleep, Oliver and Margot sat on the porch steps, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable silence of new beginnings. Above them, stars pierced the darkness, countless points of light offering ancient patterns for those who knew how to see them. "She'll need physical therapy for the wrist," Margot said eventually, "and the cast will complicate things for a while." "We'll manage," Oliver replied. "Together." He didn't reach for her hand, respecting the careful distance between them. But he did reach into his pocket, extracting a small, ordinary house key. "No strings attached," he said, placing it on the step between them. "Whether you decide to stay or go, whether the cottage becomes reality or remains a drawing, this house remains open to you." Margot picked up the key, its weight familiar yet somehow new in her palm. "No hidden cameras?" she asked, only half joking. "No hidden anything," Oliver promised. "Just 3 broken people trying to make something whole." Above them, a shooting star traced a brief, brilliant path across the night sky. Too fast to wish upon, but bright enough to remind them that even the darkest expanses contain unexpected moments of light.